Cod, which is also on the east coast of the U.S. So the students come out to our ships wherever in the world they're sailing at the time. We have one ship in the Atlantic and one ship in the Pacific Ocean, and they are operating the boat. They're steering, they are navigating, they're hauling the sails up and bringing them back down. They work in the galley to prepare meals. They work in the engine room to do the electronics. So they're fully participating members of the crew. And part of the mission of the ship is to conduct scientific research. So students put together research projects before they come to the boat that they then carry out while they're sailing. So we're always collecting data in support of our student research projects. So one of the data sets that we've collected for a very long time is collected with a plankton net. So here's another picture of the ship. And on the right-hand side, I get a picture of what we call the Newstone net. And it's about 1 meter wide and 1/2 meter tall. And we just tow it alongside the ship. So you can see it here from sort of a bird's eye view. There's this boom that comes off the side, and then we just let the net into the water so that it's collecting anything that floats at the sea surface that's right at the air-sea interface. And it's the equivalent of, did we lose someone? I think we might have. I'm going to keep going?
Yeah, why don't you just keep going, and then when we wrap this up, we'll make sure to see who's on and not.
Okay. So the net collects anything that's floating at the sea surface, and it filters about as much as 2,000 bathtubs of water. So if you think about how much water a typical bathtub holds, we're filtering 2,000 bathtubs of water. And what we do is we have our students then look at what comes out of the net. So at the very end of the net, there's a collecting jar, and we rinse everything in the net into a bucket and then pour it into a sieve. And then they pull out all kinds of interesting marine organisms and any kind of debris that we see. Most of it is plastic. So they're mostly these little tiny bits of plastic that look like this. So here on the left is the same sieve that you saw in the picture before, and here's some tweezers. And all of these colored, sort of differently shaped pieces are plastics. And so these are bits of plastic that probably broke off from some larger item, like a bottle or a bag or a straw or a bottle cap, things that we use every day. And they float around on the sea surface, and the sunlight on the plastic makes them weak. And then when they get tossed around in the waves, they break up into these little pieces, and then we collect them in our net. And so each of these pieces is smaller than your smallest fingernail. On the right side here, this is a Petri dish, and there's a ruler here, so you can see it's not very big, but you can see really nicely how there's all kinds of different colors and shapes and sizes of these little bits of plastic. So we've been collecting and counting plastics in data. So here is North America, and let's see, our organization is here. That's where SEA is. This is the Caribbean Sea. Here's South America, and this is about the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, the North Atlantic Ocean. So each one of these dots is a place where we towed that plankton net and counted the amount of plastic that was in it. And the colors tell you how much plastic there was. So the warm colors up here are a lot of plastic, and the cool colors are very little plastic. And so we can start to ask questions about why there tends to be a lot of plastic in this region of the ocean. The black stars are the highest numbers of plastics that we collect, and all of those are pretty far from land, which is interesting because the land is where we think a lot of this plastic trash comes from. And so my background in physical oceanography and thinking about ocean currents comes in handy when we look at this kind of data, because we can use what we know about ocean currents to understand why the plastic is collecting here. And then in our lab at SEA, we actually look at each of these individual pieces of plastic, and we measure their size and their shape. And we use this instrument here which has a laser and gives us a readout like this. And based on the peaks in this readout, we can tell what kind of plastic it is, because there are many, many different types of plastic some of which float in water, which are the ones that we collect, and some of them sink in water, so we don't see those in our nets. So we're trying to understand a little bit about where these plastics came from and how long they've been in the ocean, and really just doing detective work based on all of these bits that we've collected over the past 30 plus years. So that's just a little bit about the work that we're doing. I'd like to spend the rest of the time answering any questions, and I think I'm going to stop sharing my screen.
Yes, and we might sort of check in and see who heard what, too.
Yeah.
Okay, it looks like we've got the other two groups. So, let's see, Tanya's class, were you guys able to hear everything?
Yeah.
Okay, do you guys, did you have any questions for Kara?
Well, we have questions, but like for this certain part, we don't. We understood everything, so we can just.
Okay. Okay, what about Dondi's class? Did you have any questions for Kara?
They asked you about the net you use to collect these plastic things.
What would you like to know about the net?
Yes, how big was it or something like that?
Okay. I'm going to turn my video on. Is that okay, Lauren?
Yeah, let's see if it works. Okay.
Then I can actually use my hands. Okay. So the net, well, I forgot I'm connected to my computer. The net is about this wide and this tall. So it's quite small, actually. A single person can lift up the net and put it over the side of the boat into the water. And then we tie the net to the ship so that we don't lose it. And then we tow it for 30 minutes. And then we haul it back on board the ship with a rope. And then we use a hose to spray it out into a bucket. So it's very simple to do. And part of the reason we like this piece of equipment is that our students can do it all themselves after maybe a week of training on board the ship. And then there's a lot of very tedious picking. You have to look with your eyeballs and try to figure out what bits in the sieve are plastic. And I also have a little vial that I can try to hold up here so that you can see what one of these samples looks like. Can you see the little bits of plastic in here? Yeah, so they're very, very small. And they're different colors and different shapes, and so it's very hard to find out where they came from. They've probably been drifting around in the ocean for a very long time.
All right. Tanya's class, you had some questions about other things? Because we can't see you, if you have a question, why don't you tell us your name and maybe one thing about yourself and then ask a question?
Before this conference, we were talking about the plastic problems and we don't understand some things that we would like to ask.
Okay, so since all of my group mates really want me to read my question first, I'll read it. Have scientists found out any problems that occur in a human body that are caused by the plastic pieces that are in the water and food?
Mm-hmm. That's a great question, and I think one of the big questions that we're trying to answer right now. So what we do know is that a wide variety of marine animals can eat this plastic because it's very small. So we know that this plastic can be in fish and shellfish and different species that we eat as food. The question is, what impact does that have either on the animals or on us? And so for the most part, we're not too concerned about internal damage from eating these small bits of plastic. I mean, if you think about eating some large, sharp thing, that might cut you up inside. But these small pieces are not dangerous in that way. The bigger concern is the chemicals that are associated with the plastics. So in order to, when the plastics are manufactured, a lot of chemicals are added to them to give them their color or to make them flexible or to make them less resistant to the sunlight breaking them down. And we know that some of those chemicals can be harmful to humans. But what we don't know is whether the plastics are actually putting any significant amount into the seafood, and then whether the seafood has any more of those chemicals than it would otherwise have when we eat it. I think we lost them.
Yeah. But, they're back, and now we can see them.
We can see you. Great. So it's a big question. The answer is we don't know. But, we are exposed to plastic all in our daily lives. If you look around you, so much of what you use is plastic, and a lot of the food that we eat is packaged in plastic. And so I think we, if we're concerned about human health, we should look bigger than just seafood.
That was a great question. Does someone else in your group have a question?
I have. So, if you would be a president, what plans would you have to get rid of plastic?
Oh, that's a great question. I don't know if I want to be president, but, that's a hard question because we really rely on plastic for a lot of what we need. I mean, our cars are plastic, our computers are plastic. A lot of medical things used in our medical facilities are plastic. So one of the things I would like just people to think about is how we use plastic, and are there types of plastics that we can do without? So one thing I think about a lot is plastic drinking straws. Do you ever use a drinking straw that's plastic? So one project we're working on is trying to get people to think about using something like a stainless steel straw that you can just wash over and over again, instead of using a plastic one that gets thrown away. And the same thing with utensils, knives and forks that you might use if you go to your cafeteria or if you go out to a restaurant. It's much better to have something that you can use over and over again so we don't create all of this plastic waste. But I think also we have to ask the people who are creating all of the packaging that our food comes in and that all the things that we buy come in, to ask them to think about how we're going to use that plastic. How are we going to get rid of it at the end of its useful life? So we just need to think carefully about how we use plastic in our world and try to use less of it when we don't need it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, who else has a question?
When did this problem start?
Oh, great question. So the first plastics, so these are materials that people have made, and the first ones were invented over a century ago. But it wasn't until about 1950, after World War II, when plastics started being made in very large quantities and used in everyday uses like we use them today. So in about 1950, that's when we started mass producing plastic. And as early as 10 years later, plastics were found inside seabirds' bellies. So it did not take very long from the time that we started using them in large amounts to the time that they were found in marine animals. And then it was only 20 years later when these small bits were first measured in the wide open ocean. So the problem has been around for a very long time, and it's getting worse because every year we make more and more and more plastic. If you look at how much plastic there was in 1950, and then today it goes, and it just keeps going up. So that's one of the main reasons I think that I'm concerned about plastic in the ocean, is that it doesn't really ever go away, and we're just putting more and more in every year.
How it is possible to count the number of plastic?
It takes a very long time and very good eyes. And that's one problem that we're trying to think about smarter ways to count plastic. So right now, we just have to use our eyeballs and pick out from our samples those plastics. But we would like to have some kind of machine where you could put water through and have some kind of laser be able to identify plastic pieces as they go by. But right now, it's very basic and very simple the way that we measure plastic in the ocean and on the beach and in the sediments on the seafloor. And we need to make some good improvements in our technology to get faster and be able to do more of that kind of sampling.
Thank you.
Thank you. We need more engineers.
Okay, can we ask?
Yes, yes.
How deep can you examine the ocean, the water? Because the net goes only on the surface of the water.
Yes.
What about the plastic in the deep of the ocean?
Yes, very good question. So we do have some nets that we tow below the surface, but they're still quite close to the surface, within the upper maybe 200 meters. But the plastics, so plastics like water bottles or soft drink bottles, soda bottles, the plastic that those are made of will sink. And to study the seafloor is very, very difficult because it's dark and it's deep and it's hard to get to. You really need a boat. So we have some places in the world where people have submersibles or submarines with cameras, or scuba divers will go with cameras and count. But we know far less about what's on the seafloor because it's so hard to study those regions. So I'm sure there's a lot of plastic on the seafloor. It's probably not the small bits, because a bottle will just sink and it's very hard for it to break up because there's no sun at the bottom of on the seafloor. So it's probably a lot of big bottles and tires and large heavy items are sitting on the seafloor, but we don't know nearly as much about that because it's so hard to study.
Dondi, does your class have another question?
No? Okay.
All right, how about Tanya's class? Do you guys have another question?
For now, we're like.
How many people? Someone have a question about how many people need
The question was how many people are participating in the diving under the water for that plastic?
Oh, not very many, I don't think. It depends on where you are. In Hawaii, where there are very many coral reefs, there's a program where divers go and try to get fishing nets that are drifting and get them before they get onto the reef. So there's an organized program in Hawaii, but I don't know of any other big programs. There are people studying the seafloor for other reasons, and they may have photos. If they're studying sea life at the seafloor, they may still have photos of trash just because it's there. So I think we're seeing more of that data from people who are looking for other things but know that plastic trash is of interest. But it's probably a handful of people, probably not very many people.
Okay, thank you.
All right. We're about at the 30 minutes, which is what we said we were going to try to do today. So does anybody have one last question? Doesn't sound like it. So if you guys think of any questions, you can always have your teachers send them to me, or you can use our website and ask questions, which I know that both of your classes are, and it's been really great. I know Rich has been really happy to have questions from everybody. So, Kara, did you have anything else you wanted to wrap up with?
I just want to say thank you for joining the call and for thinking about this problem, because plastic is something that we all use every day and we don't often even think about it. So thank you very much. It's really fun talking to you all.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thanks for
everybody, and
organizing.
hopefully we'll talk again soon.
Thank you.
All right, bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.